Just unfortunately, as many of you have heard, the weather has messed up a lot of travel, so unfortunately Neil Zygo couldn't make it to join us, but we do have still Neil Singel and Tom Gooley to join Mark, so I'll pass it back to them. I apologize for that change.
All right. Do I need? Okay. Can you hear me?
You can just turn it on.
Got it. How about now? Yeah. All right. Hello. And please welcome Tom Gooley and Neil Singel. Tom is the managing director at LPL Financial. Neeloy is the chief marketing officer at GE Power. And we could not have two better people here to talk about digital transformation, how it's affecting how you manage a company, how you weather the storm from startups and tech companies that are all around this area. And so we're going to focus on the customer, which I think is probably an important person when you're starting a business. So let's start with the very basic concept of what does it mean to put the customer at the center of every business decision you make?
Look, I think the previous panel kind of talked about it quite nicely. You do have to have a purpose, I think even before you have the customers. And in many analog industries and companies, the purpose usually is given to you, right? You don't change that purpose overnight because the customers like a company with a purpose. And like Quentin talked about New York Times, we associate a certain purpose that New York Times brand has, and you carry that forward with you. So I think as you kind of transition from an analog to a digital world in many cases, what stays consistent in my view is the purpose. And at least the industry that I belong to in GE, and you heard Prith mention, our purpose is how do we power the humanity, right? And that redefines everything we do. And then what does that mean from the customer perspective? Now look, the customers are also in their digital transformation, but they don't know often that they are. Because either they are transforming themselves or they're getting transformed. Just like we're all talking about it from an inside out. And if I take it from any industry, but let's take an example of utilities since I belong to that industry. In the last 10 years, that is one of the most underperforming asset stocks you can buy in the market. And one of the reasons is this digital disruption and distributed power, solar, renewables coming in. The business model, the purpose they had is starting to dissolve. What they had a purpose was to provide powers to their consumers and in return get $1. They don't get paid based on electrons anymore. They're trying to transform their purpose. So we need to address that before we can sell them any piece of technology or we can sell them any piece of software or hardware. So I think that's a fundamental important element from understanding what your customer needs and what their context is before, because I feel, and this is true even in my company right now, we're still very insular. You wake up in the morning, and it's true very much in a public company or a private company, you think about your four walls, what your boss is worried about, what my goals and responsibilities are. You don't actually have a mechanism, because I love the concept that Ganesh was mentioning, because we all are married to our jobs. We're not married to our customers. So how do you change that culture? I don't think that's an analog or a digital context. And I think there are companies in Silicon Valley who have succeeded in that in a phenomenal way, and I think you see their market capitalization as a result of that.
Which companies do you think?
I mean, I do think Apple, until recently, was a very customer-centric organization. Salesforce,
What happened recently?
My personal experience, I think the retail model is going south.
iPhone break-in?
That, $150, my wife was, you have to now wait on a call center line for 15 minutes. They're starting to feel like a utility company. And it happens to everybody.
Well,
It's really hard to.
They also don't quite understand that we're the ones that actually make them successful. So when you go in there with Apple and you have a broken phone or something like that, the immediate thing is it's going to cost you $200.
Right.
It's just going to cost you, and they have a very rigid policy around how they do things, and there's no flexibility in that. So they can't bend, and so therefore you feel like you own an Apple and you're hooked into this thing, and so you're paying through the nose every time you walk into the store.
That was Salesforce is one that I've been really impressed in their enterprise centricity. It's a hard one to replicate. I mean, it is one that I would think they're really in this block. One that I would urge you to consider visiting them. If you're already their customer, they'll make it a point to help you see how they look at customer centricity in every aspect of their operation.
But just going on to the Apple thing, one of the things that we all have to balance, right? So yes, you want to be customer centric, you want to be flexible, but you don't want to live in the land of exceptions. You don't want to live in the land where everything that you do is an exception for a customer. If you take the LPL business, the first challenge is defining who your customer is, right? So what we offer is the back-end processing for financial advisors. So you can make an argument that we have 14,000 customers, right? Those are the people that service. They, on top of that, have 7 million clients that they have to service. So which one of those is actually our customer? Because I send statements to the end customer, the end investor, but it's the advisor that I have the interaction with. So you have to understand who your actual customer is. Now, every one of those advisors is about 4,000 different business models that we support. So I have to have a flexible enough infrastructure that can handle that many different business models. But what I have to protect against, in some sense, and be a little Apple-like, is the land of exceptions. So if all 15 or 14,000 financial advisors want me to do something very unique and special for them, that's a pretty hard process to manage, because then I will have a process where every time I do something, I can get no efficiencies in it. So you have to find that balance between being very customer-centric and being able to do the things that they want, and being able to get the efficiencies out of your business.
So you need to think about your customers, not your customers' customers, or their customers.
But the way that I service my customers determines how they can service their customers. So if I don't put the capabilities in place for them to do the things that they want to do, they won't be able to service their customers. If they're not successful, I won't be successful.
Let's go back to Apple for one more minute, because I think they're a pretty interesting business case study. The most valuable company in the world is arguably the most successful one right now, or before the earnings reported about an hour ago. So Apple, when a company gets that big, and Tom, you've worked at some of the biggest firms on the street, what happens to a company where something changes? We can talk about Apple and not any of your former employers, but what changes at a company where maybe that they shift away from that customer center?
You know, it's interesting. Everybody talks about change, and we want change in our life. We want to do all this thing. So I've worked at some large companies: Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, TIA, Kraft, and now LPL. Right. So those are some pretty large companies. Been in the business of supporting customers for a long time. The number one thing that I've found is customers always demand change, and they hate it. We roll out change, and we change something. We move a symbol from one side of a screen to another side, and I'll get 50 phone calls saying, "I can't believe you changed that. I liked it the way it was." You roll out a new system. You roll out a new tool. Online this, online. There is a subset that's absolutely going to love you. There is the vast majority of them that will complain to you and say, "I can't believe you changed something. You fixed something that wasn't broken." Without a shadow of a doubt, everywhere I've been, everybody demands change and they hate it. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Well, the complication is that not every customer is the same. I mean, they all have different needs.
So that's defining who your customer is, right? So we have, in the places I've been, customers that range from brand new out of college, generally pretty open to change, to people that are in their 60s and 70s and worth a tremendous amount of money. And so when they say, "I don't want change," versus the person that's worth, $50 versus 50 million, there's a little bit of a tug towards that $50 million client. It's not all, rich and financially wealthy clients don't want change, but generally they kind of like it the way they like it, and that's how it is. So you have to know who your customer is and the range of your customer is, what's acceptable. So what you really ultimately need to do is have a variety of things that you offer. Again, managing the exceptions, right? So you offer a few different flavors of whatever it is you do without getting crazy on the amount of exceptions that you do. That's really, you have to start to segment out your client base and understand what are the drivers of each individual group within that client base. and then you make the changes appropriate to those conflicts.
Does it work similarly at GE?
Oh my God, I mean, I think it doesn't matter what industry it is. I mean, Tyler, you tell me if this is true. What Philip Kotler wrote 7 years ago as the basics of marketing strategy still holds true. We just talked about segmentation. It's harder to do in industrial spaces, but with the digital transformation of marketing, MarTech, it's getting a lot better. I mean, in consumer world, you have perfect information to a certain extent, right? In Google or Apple, every click of your button is being tracked, and you can segment the customer based on demographics, psychographics, needs, what have you. Business-to-business environment is harder, but it's so transformative. And I think the point that you're just making about segmentation is so crucial, because digital transformation is not going to be led by your customer. It will have to be an inside out. You will know what's happening in the marketplace, and you will not expect mass adoption. So it's really important to find the early adopters, just as you would if you were Apple 10 years ago. Your early adopters were very different than what it is now. And if you make that bet wrong, you would kill the wrong products, or you would move out of a strategy too soon. And it's very similar. Like, how many of you were lining up when the first iPhone came out? Probably 5%. I don't know if you want to raise your hand. I wasn't one of them. But there's one person in the room.
Yeah, not embarrassed to.
Apple did not innovate.
That's everything.
But that's a great customer for experimentation and early adoption. And then you find the next few niches, and then it becomes, so that's segmentation strategy for your digital transformation. And in an industrial world like GE, we have to do the exact same thing. I'll give you a personal example with an interaction with a customer. This is, I can't name the customer, we'll do this confidential. This is a customer who represents 40% of this country's GDP. They had a cyber attack 5 years ago in their region, and they essentially said, no one should even have access to the internet, let alone cloud and data going to somewhere else. So in terms of innovation from digital transformation, you could say they were going backwards, not forward. But it all became clear to them when they saw what the outcomes we could deliver with the right technology. And so we are now the only company that now has data allowed to be taken away from their plants to come to US in a GE-hosted data center, because they just say, we can't ignore this. This is 10x value for us. Every percentage point that you can save for us is equals to 75 million. So you will have to find a reason they can't say no. But again, you still have to find the early adopters, because once you find those early adopters who would say, yeah, I can't do without this technology, it'll start growing as a vital business.
See, I don't think it's about the devices, though. I mean, this discussion that we're having around the iPhones, to me, it's all about the interconnectivity of everything we do. I don't want differences between the technology I'm using, whether I'm using my watch, my phone, my iPad. To me, it's about the interconnectivity.
Yeah, but you're making a really good point. In our view, it's a platform when take all. Because you will never buy, or very rarely buy, a non-Apple product if you're an iPhone.
Exactly.
Right? Because they have created an ecosystem effect. But it starts with something. They started with,
Yes.
along with our iPhone, they started with, so you really have to find that spark before you can make that interconnectivity. But ultimately, it's a platform when all, there'll be one or two winners in every industry, every sub-segment industry. You can start with the niche.
But I think customers, certainly our customers, are telling us about things that are being done in other industries that they want us to do that our industry has traditionally not done. So to me, this expansion of everybody's thinking around this interconnectivity goes beyond just a single customer relationship
Sure.
with one company. It's now becoming kind of compounded.
It is, but it's an evolution, right? 10
Okay.
years ago, that iPhone, it was the thing, right? Having the iPhone was the big deal because there wasn't the connectivity. Now it's a commodity. An
Yeah.
iPhone or a Galaxy, I know there are people, religious wars, that people like one or the other, but they're the same tool, right? Or a tablet versus an iPad. It's a commodity, so now that's just pure table stakes. And what we're talking about is the evolution to get to the next level. And sometimes, we talked earlier about there's 1,000 companies sitting on the side of the road and on the 101 that weren't successful. There will be 10,000 more that won't be successful as well. But there will also, some of these technologies, some of this interconnectedness will just become a commodity. And you want to stay ahead of that commodity curve. And that's really the challenge that we have, as opposed to trying to find, for us, big, large, hairy corporations, we're not going to come out with a new iPhone. It's just not going to happen. It's not the way we're set up. The guy from First Republic was absolutely right in that, you know, we have to protect our core, whether we like it or not. It's not easy to manage all of that heavy infrastructure, and then one of the ways you do it is you just try and stay ahead of the commodity curve. It's not like you're going to go off and invent a new thing, because that would put us at risk. When my organization gets put at risk, FINRA and the SEC come in for a visit, and it's not a really pleasant conversation. So we do everything in our power to make sure that they don't think we're doing something that's risky, because that's a really bad place to be.
And my view, maybe it's industry specific, that if you're an industry that you're not thinking of inventing the next iPhone, you will not exist in the next 5 to 10 years. And I personally think that's just probably, it's a personal theory I have, that that's true for all industries, but the speed of that transformation might differ. But you have to find the next iPhone, and it doesn't matter if your size actually is not an advantage anymore. The customers don't care about your size, right? They would say, okay, I won't get fired if I hire a GE, but that doesn't take you far along. I think you have to have the processes inside your company to help you identify those black swan of iPhones who are attacking you. But if you can't invent your next iPhone, you will not exist. And that might differ from industry to industry, and it's easy for me to sit here and say that for a company with a $100 billion market cap, the only surviving Dow Jones business. So we could definitely ride the wave for another 20 years, because we don't have any competitors in developing jet engines or gas turbines, and you have to go back 50 years if you want to be a competitor right now. You need to first invent a time machine before you can start competing in the gas turbine. But the point is, that doesn't help you. The margins and the growth rates might be moving all to the data and the information, because that's what the customer, the point that the previous panel made. They don't want to buy a jet engine, they don't want to buy a gas turbine, even though they have a lot of need for power and more planes to be flown. What they really want is an outcome. And the airline doesn't care that they are owning the jet engine. They just want to provide a service to their end customers. So somebody could disrupt you, not with hardware, but with information technology. And that is, to me, what an iPhone did. It wasn't the hardware innovation. They're not a manufacturing company. They're a design company, and they're a great experience company. So I mean, you don't have to take the Apple analogy literally, but I do fundamentally think you have to be the next iPhone if you want to survive.
The structure of Apple is interesting, especially when put next to GE. And Apple is has moved toward this vertical integration in the last 15, 20 years, whereas GE exists in something of an opposite realm of horizontal integration, where your jet engine team is not necessarily talking to your power team every day. Are there upsides to that approach that you can talk to from personal?
No, I think what you're saying is what GE used to be, let's say 5 years ago. We were born out of a conglomerate model where, when liquidity was still an issue, investors would pay for somebody who could do capital allocation better than a financial institution or a hedge fund could do. That business model is long gone. You have to be specialized. Scale doesn't matter. Yeah, of course you can have a 3.5% yield, which will be better than maybe, I don't know for how long, but it was for the last decade. So maybe the point I would make is you have to have what we call now in the company a store, a GE store, that every business unit takes advantage of, which is why we're divested of the financial institution, divested of appliances, now selling of the lighting business. All of that thing is to drive back to the core that is a analog business that is now getting digital, which is why GE is inventing, in our world, the iPhone is our platform, the Predix platform. We're saying the data is more valuable than the hardware itself. And so I think it is an interesting paradigm to ask me again in 5 years if we succeeded. If we didn't, we will not survive as a company. Because our stock market doesn't look at your current performance. Their net present value for future performance. So it's a lot about perception, right? Amazon shouldn't have existed if their investors are betting on their current performance. So I think that paradigm shift is a really important one for CEOs and CXOs in our larger existing businesses to say.
So one of the other things you called out is that interconnectivity within a firm. In all the places that I've been, they've all been fairly large firms, that's one of the biggest struggles, is how do you get the right hand to know what the left hand's doing? Because there's often some really cool stuff going on one side of the firm that the other side doesn't. Some of the places that were made analysts were just unbelievable, just the political silos that went on there were just unbelievable. And you just couldn't get anybody to play in the sandbox of life very well together. That really hurt the performance of the company because you had all these opportunities to intermingle and make it tighter. At the end of the day, the thing that really makes it work all comes back to the data. Being able to manage the just tremendous amount of information that we have, not only about our customers, but how we perform and how we do things. That's really the hardest part of all of this digital world, is managing all of that data and being able to work your way through it in an intelligent fashion and understand what it's telling you. That's a tough job.
So what does that look like in practice? How do you manage the data to make sure that everyone in the organization who needs to know what they should know is in the loop?
You know, it's funny. The need to manage data really really didn't start with the digital age, right? It started years and years ago as soon as they started to commoditize manufacturing, right? It started to become about how do you understand what it takes to actually build something. How do you know, everything used to be a craft deal, and then they started to build processes, and that's where the metrics started, the data started to get important. So you'll find that some firms are starting to create data officers, people that actually understand it, and pull it, and manage it. You'll find that there are a lot of degrees out there where people are starting to get PhDs in this. It's actually quite an art, or more of an art than a science, actually, to understand how to tease it apart. So getting the information and being able to present it in a rational fashion, we literally have teams of people. That's what they do for a living. We have data engineers that they scour the organization and try and find the places where the data resides and pull it in and put it together.
Have you found that to be effective, to have a data sort of group within the company?
If I look at where we were as firms 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if I was back then and looking at the stuff we have now, I'd be amazed and think it's everything I ever wanted. Where I sit now, I just want more. I want it done in a faster manner. It used to be, you know, when I first started collecting data when I was at Goldman Sachs and producing it, I do it on a weekly and a monthly basis. Now I get reports that we had the snow crisis back east, and so every hour they were sending me an update on where we were on a whole series of processes because we were short-staffed. Right, so I was looking for it hourly, and I was a little frustrated that I didn't have a lot on my computer that I could just pull in the information and understand where we were across the 4,000 different things we do on a day-to-day basis. So your expectations just improve the more you get.
Yeah, maybe I think I echo with a lot of what you just said. Data is king, but I think organization culture, at least the way we are approaching this, is the function of a chief digital officer. Becoming a commercial innovator, a product innovator on the cutting edge side. You're again to the point about where do you start the innovation. You don't always need to start with innovating in the core, which I agree, but you have to innovate at scale. You can't put a chief digital officer and then give that person a mandate to go experiment. You have to give this person the mandate to have an at-scale innovation, really fund it as if this was the only thing you had in mind to fund. Then after you have figured out the experimentation. So organizational structure, at least in GE's context, we've experimented over the last 6-7 years. What we've settled is chief digital officer in every business unit reporting to a GE level chief digital officer, and that person's mandate is commercial growth. And then it's also IT innovation. There's a lot of what bottles up. So maybe I'll ask you a quick question. How many of your companies depend on email as your fundamental way of communicating? Well, that's actually impressive. That's not that hard. I think if you ask that same board for companies in the valley, it'll be barely one or two who still communicate in email. It's a symbol of where communication, innovation, and internal structures are broken down. These hierarchies, distances. A lot of those, another example of analog innovation versus digital innovation. A lot of conglomerate companies, we have to have geographical dispersion, right? So GE has now 300,000 employees all over the world. it's not very good to innovate when you have that much of a geographical dispersion. You really need to bring them close in a room, and your drawing boards is where you start innovating, which is if you go to a culture in Wharton School, you know, where they've got these young guys doing how they think is different than how we've been trained to think in the analog environment. So I think those small things add up to quite a bit, but I would still say that one fundamental aspect of success or failure is, of course, your CEO's commitment. And the second one is what structure, organization structure, what rewards and recognition, what mechanisms you have for communication. Those things matter a huge lot.
Well, I'd also say the other one is how you allow the communication to flow. So love them or hate them, but one of the things that was phenomenal about Goldman Sachs back in the day when I worked there, you could have a partner sitting at a trading desk worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You could have Johnny or Jenny analysts that was brand new on it. If Johnny and Jenny analysts had the better argument, they won. They are the ones that got the right thing. So in the 2008 crisis, Goldman did fairly well in that they didn't get stuck on all the mortgage stuff. Why? Because they had a couple people within their organization that spotted it, and that got all the way to the top of the house, and they were willing to allow people that actually had a rational argument to win. Right? That was one of the things that I loved the most about years ago working there. It's also one of the things that you have to, as a leader in an organization, you have to understand, just because you're the leader doesn't mean you're the smartest person in the room. Right? You just have to be the one sitting at the top of the food chain at that moment in time. You really have to leverage all of the people in your organization. The more people you can get in your organization behind whatever the vision is that you want to accomplish, and use the brain power of the broader organization, and allow that communication stream up and down to work, the more successful you're going to be. But if you try and manage everything from the top and only, I am the CEO, I'm the CEO, and I have the vision, and if people don't follow my vision, they're all idiots, you're not going to. You just won't, because there's a lot more smart brain power in the broader context of the organization that you need to leverage.
What would you say is the biggest competitive advantage for a business that's trying to navigate this digital transforming environment? I mean, is it data? Is it this customer-centric approach? Is it this, ability to sort of not let everything be dictated by the senior managers? Or is it something else? You talked about the co-location of having a headquarter-centric approach.
I mean, I can go, at least in our case, we think it is defensible intellectual property. If you don't have a defensible if you don't have that algorithm Google developed that helped them to create, which likely now will be the most valuable company on earth, based on the iPhone recent. At the core of it, it has to be something that you can defend for years to come, and you continue to innovate on top of it. Because if you say it's my access to data, well, access to data is getting pretty commoditized because data cost is not that with Amazon's help. You can store gigabytes and terabytes and petabytes of data without too much money. I think what you do with the data is probably more important than what you don't do with the data. Like, you can store a lot of data. So to us, it's the intellectual property which often ends up being analytics. What core analytics you created, and if it's non-core, open source it. Let the world innovate with you, because then you have real scale. So I think you can look at the consumer internet innovation, and the playbooks are already there. You have to pick the right one. At least in our case, what I worry about is, given that we are GE, we feel we can execute on all of those playbooks at the same time. If we want to be a Tesla, a Salesforce, and a Amazon Web Services all at the same time. But that aside, I think you really have to know what your differentiation at a defensible intellectual property, things like brand, things like customer access to data, in my view, are not defensible in the long run.
Mine's going to sound kind of corny, but at the end of the day, I think it's culture. I think, whatever the widget is that you make, if you develop the right culture within your company and you sustain it, so you have to have leaders that embrace that vision as to where you want to go and what the culture should be, makes all the difference in the world. People will run through brick walls if they feel that they're doing it for the right thing, for the right culture, for the right cause. If they don't, man, it is Lord of the Flies, and it is just unpleasant. But you really, if you have the right culture, if you set the right tone as a leader of people to get the job done, people are amazing. They'll do anything. They will break down through walls, through anything.
So how do you develop that? Does it come down to hiring, or get like a weekly meet? Let's talk about culture this week.
It's everything in everything you do. I think the higher you go in an organization, the more you realize that you are on a pedestal 100% of the time. So if you're having a bad day and you pervade that through the organization, your organization is having a bad day. So you have to be very conscious about what you do, how you act, the things you do every single moment of the day as a leader of an organization. I think you also, you have to be pragmatic, you have to be reasonable, and you have to be fair. You can be tough, but you have to be fair. And I think people will respect that, and I think people will move forward. But it is being conscious about all of the actions you take. Most importantly though, I think it's about knowing where you want to go. And being able to convey that in a way that inspires people to do what you need them to do. But you really need to know where you're going, and you need to walk the walk. There's an expression that I love that we often judge others by their actions and ourselves by our values. You have to be very conscious of that 100% of the time. You have to watch what you do and question yourself. The place that I've seen a number of places derail is that people start to think that I've made good decisions for so many years, I need to put less work into the decisions. Because I've achieved this level of power, I'm right. I'm just always right. So I really don't need to spend the effort and energy to figure out how to be right.
Maybe I'll kind of give you an analogy to think about the culture context. If you're an existing analog company trying to digitally transform, think of it as gene splicing. You have a DNA that you need to cut through. Keep certain part of the RNA still there, but you need to merge it with something. And you have to do that without mutating into a cancerous organization, which is really hard to do. And so I think it's fundamental, it has to start from the CEO. If the leader is not bought in, it's a waste of effort. And you have to, if your leader hasn't bought in, you have to make that leader buy in. And then you have to create that mechanism. And at least for us, it's location. It makes a big difference. We invested in this. Okay, it's not cheap for analog companies to say we want to hire talent and compete with the Facebooks and make those. It's not just even competing on a compensation basis. It's competing on the purpose basis. Do you want to be going in and inventing the next social media revolution, or do you want to, power the 1.2 billion people who don't have power? That kind of ethos, you have to believe in your purpose, because that's what attracts the new millennium talent. It's not just about money and fame, although that still matters. So I think that gene splicing analogy is something to consider how you think about it. It has to be a controlled experiment. You've got to have the CEO bought in. You've got to reward the ones who are in the third, fourth tier of the organization who are trying to innovate, learning and changing, and make sure you execute, do a few public assassinations also, because, frankly, human condition, fear works better than hope sometimes. So culture change, you have to take advantage of both.
Just to support his comment, I was reading an article the other day, but I don't buy into the fear with them, is that they did a study, 50 people were making $250 grand a year, and they wanted to incent them. So what they offered them was a few different things. 50 grand, CEO as your mentor, certain kind of just working on high-powered projects that, got your broad exposure across the firm, blah, 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 blah. Most people would be crass and say, oh, most people would take the 50 grand and run. Out of the 50 people, 2 took the 50 grand. Everybody else took the non-cash-based reward.
We're going to try to touch on a couple more topics for a few more minutes, and then we'll take questions from the audience. I wanted to talk quickly about this concept that we spoke about earlier about reverse mentoring, which can be a pretty valuable asset in the sort of digital transformation, where you have these younger digital natives you can rely on to help inject their unique experience into the top level of the organization. Do either of your companies have any sort of processes built in or anything informal to kind of encourage some of the younger talent to inspire the top of the company?
We don't have anything formal from a reverse mentoring or mentoring program. However, I run a decent-sized organization. I spend a fair amount of my time walking around and just talking to people and being out there. Kind of corny call, but I call it Toss with Tom, where I actually sit in a room probably on a weekly basis with about 20 people in my organization. I have no agenda, it's open conversation, tell me what's going on. The conversations have ranged, the company's based in Charlotte, right? So why we love the Panthers and why they're going to win the Super Bowl, to here's how we need to change customer service. And sometimes all within the course of an hour we can have that. But we go all over the place. Why do I do that? A, it puts me closer to the actual people in the trenches, people doing the daily work. So then I'm walking in the hallways and people will see me, people will have a conversation with me, I see people in the cafeteria, wherever you see them, it starts to build that familiarity. It's a heck of a lot easier telling somebody something difficult when you actually know them, you can chat with them, as opposed to, oh my gosh, it's that guy sitting in that office in the corner that, I see him walk in and out and I've never spoken a word to him, versus, yeah, I've had 30 conversations with him and now I need to tell him something that's going on. It's a heck of a lot easier. It allows me to get a better touch and feel of what's going on in the organization. Not perfect, but it helps.
Do you have any?
Yeah, we don't have a formal reverse mentoring, but it's almost like our digital organization within GE is now the reverse mentoring organization for the rest of the company. So like last year, our San Ramon office, which is 1,200 employees, we had about 50,000 visitors, but half of them were a GE leadership team who wanted to come and learn about technology and and with their customer many times. So that's actually, in my personal experience, that works more effectively when they see it in action. I think when you do it as, hey, let me show you how you can tweet better, it's important, but the leader doesn't internalize and doesn't make it personal. I think you've got to make that personal in my view. But I love the idea of the walk around. And the other advice I would, for what it's worth, is hire a team with that perspective. Get a couple of millennials, get somebody with a tech background. They don't have any experience in the industry. That's actually a good thing. Because we as hiring managers often want to take the lowest risk approach, and our HR team is incentivized to find people who are already in the industry to come and hire at least 30% of your team outside of the industry who are digital natives, who have done a disruption or have done some kind of a startup and probably have failed a few times. They are the best out because they have seen what works, what doesn't work. I think that those who reverse mentoring programs, in my view, are kind of pretty effective.
The other point I throw out there is, just as I said, you have to be conscious that everything you do is watched. You have to respond. So I have a rule that if you send me an email, whoever you are in the world, I will respond. Because again, all sorts of trouble when people are cold calling me and I respond, thanks, I'm not interested in the 40 emails from afterwards, because now they know my email address is good. But if you're anybody in my organization, you will always get a response. In some way, shape, or form, I will personally respond to you. And if you have a good idea, I'll implement it. I'll do it, and then we'll call it out to the broader organization that this idea came from so-and-so, love the idea, so we did it.
Can you recall any specific instances of that?
One of the things I run is a service center, which takes phone calls. So I was sitting in one of these talks with Tom, and we get a lot of compliments, we get a lot of angry emails as well. Somebody said, how come we never publicize the compliments? Good point, we don't. And I'm relatively new to the company, 6 months in, and there are 3 screens on the main floor where one of the service centers are, and one of them has been broken since the time I got there. So I said, well, what if we put them all in, we could see it from the room here, and I said, what if we put them all on that screen right there? And they said, sure. I didn't know one on the screen, so I just told one of the guys, and I said, we'll find out who owns that screen and put them all up on that screen. And so he now rotates these compliments through. And one of the women that sits in the service pod right near my office came into my office, showed me a picture, and it was her taking a picture of the screen with a compliment about her. And she said, they complimented me, it was up on the screen, I just sent it to my husband. I said, bingo, there we go.
Does that feel good?
It makes them feel good, and everybody started talking about, hey, was your name up there? Did you get a compliment? We only had 30 or 40 people put up at that time, but people started looking for it, and then it became, hey, wait a minute, I need to do good things so that my name gets put up there, because I want to see my name in place.
We can open it up to questions if anybody has. Yes?
So it's more of a comment than a question. Can you hear me?
It's tough.
Yeah, I think Mario will be the microphone.
Thank you. In fact, this got triggered by a
few comments you made, Tom, some time back, where you're talking about the fact that customers, they hate change, right? And maybe there are often times when the customers don't know what is best for them, right? They may not even know that they require something, like as Steve Jobs apparently said that if I go back to the customer to understand their requirements, by the time I come back and design the next gadget and launch it, the customer has moved on and I'll be late in terms of introducing the product. So I have to think ahead, and even before the customer knows, or even before I collect the requirements, I have to introduce the product. The point I'm trying to make is to preserve the code. Right? Sometimes you have to take the customer along with you through the journey of transformation. Right? To maybe exemplify it further, you're talking about that customer with say $50 million worth of assets. Right? Who doesn't want to change? Probably that it might be worth putting in effort to change that customer, because if you're talking about a change, there has to be an inherent benefit. That's the purpose why we're talking about transformative change. If we don't put in that effort, maybe somebody else will do a better job of convincing that customer, right? Saying that, hey, this is why you should change, and then that's where probably we run the risk of losing the customer. So that's the bottom line I'm trying to make is, even to preserve the core and analog customer, right? It may be worth that extra effort to take them through the change even if they hate it.
Yeah, look, I in no way, shape, or form think you should say static. I think somebody called that out in the previous panel. You have to continuously tweak and adjust and change. I will tell you without a shadow of a doubt, there are various different forms of change out there. One is kind of the evolutionary change where you just continue working the platform and you make it change over time. And people hardly ever notice that you've actually made a change. It is the easiest one to transform, but it takes a tremendous amount of discipline. The other end of the spectrum is the, oh my gosh, the world has moved away from me, so I need to do all of this massive change really quick to try and catch up. That is the most painful change you can possibly go through because you're trying to do it all at once. That change people hate. They really, really dislike it. I am a very strong and powerful advocate of the evolutionary change and doing it on a continuous basis. Yes, there will be things out there that we will miss and we won't be part of, like Uber or like the new iPhone. But at the end of the day, what my organization does is we hold on to your money, we custody your money, we have your assets, we have your retirement funds on our books. I don't think you want us to be really risky and at the cutting edge of all sorts of change, because I got your money. You want me here tomorrow. You don't want me to mess with that. So I do believe that you should be continuously in that continuous change mode. I'm a very big fan of that. I think you should absolutely talk to your customers. You should absolutely have those conversations and listen to them. You should listen to your vendors. Emphasis is a vendor for us. And they provide some pretty interesting stuff because they can see across a lot of the various parts of the world that's out there that I can have conversations, but I'm not in the trenches with them. They are. Deb is out there talking to all of his clients on a regular basis. He can come tell me some of the perspectives that he's seeing. That's very valuable. It's a different type of customer insight. But you want to have your feelers out there to understand where the world is going to try and stay ahead of it. But evolutionary, not revolutionary change.
Raise your hand if you have any if you have a question you want to pose to the panel.
When you mentioned earlier about email, and I was quite honest with reading my hand up, I'm sure there are probably more of us out there. But I'm curious, in your experience, are there companies that are innovating when it comes to digital technologies to enhance the employee communication environment?
The question was about email and innovating on communication. Go ahead.
So, thank you, Mike. So, email versus more, I would say, evolutionary, digitally based technologies for employee communications and engagement. Anything in your experiences that you want to share with the group?
I mean, I can tell you, the genius piece we experimented with Slack.
Oh yeah, we use Slack too.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting difference. For people who are used to email, it's actually a little bit of a shock. So I would urge you to start with Twitter and Facebook get used to that idea, and then you manage your time, because it is noisy. But Slack is a very interesting concept. It's going to stick. It's going to stick in my view. Email is a very inefficient way to communicate and evangelize a change, evolutionary or revolutionary. Decision-making process is very slow with emails.
Slack is a $2 billion San Francisco tech startup. Unicorn. It's kind of like large chat rooms for your companies. You stick all of your team into a chat room. You can share links and ideas.
Box is another one to look at for file sharing.
What's that?
Box. G used to have an IT, internal IT, process for sharing file. It was disastrous. We stuck with it for 10 days. The Box came, they didn't even have to communicate. It went viral. Like now there's like 95% adoption within the company. You will feel stupid if you didn't know how to use Box. And you don't even have to learn how to use Box. You just do it. And those examples are really interesting because you'll see your own reaction, and so that's what my product needs to do now with our customers. That's how they should feel about our product.
Thank you.
You know, we use a lot of the various archaic emails, yes. Texting, yes. Twitter, yes. You know, all of those kind of things to try and communicate out. The one thing I will say is everybody, again, you know, ultimate end investor, we have 7 million clients. They want to be communicated in every way under the sun, including some like it in paper. It's just who they are and where they are, and they're my clients. At the end of the day, if they want a sheet of paper, I will try my best to get them to be digital. They want a sheet of paper, so I'll send them a sheet of paper. And some, you know, want it on Twitter, and some, you know, want it in Box or wherever they want it. You know, one of the things that we're working with a vendor on creating their own effective cloud storage facility that will just take their statements and put it there. Because that's what they want. You know, so you ultimately have to support kind of older generation stuff, i.e. paper, and more modern generation, and probably everything in between. What you then have to start doing is saying, we have such a low penetration rate on this lower one, we're going to start to eliminate those things and force everybody up the chain. Sooner or later we will eliminate paper. And I will get tons of hate mail for it, but sooner or later we'll take it.
Thanks.
We've got about a few more minutes. If anyone has any other questions, otherwise we've got plenty of other topics to chat about. The core of our discussion, I think, is this customer-centric approach. And I wanted to just raise something I heard from Tim Berners-Lee, who's been beating the drum about. Tim is, of course, one of the inventors of the internet. And he's been talking about this concept of running companies where every decision the company makes has the user in mind. And he's talking specifically about tech companies, and he coined this phrase, beneficent, to describe it. But I mean, this is not a new idea. I mean, this is like a classic customer-centric concept, right? It really applies to every single industry, I would say. Can you think of any company who can't operate under this approach?
At that level, I'm sure there are lots of companies that operate not in that paradigm, not being user-centered.
The only one that comes to mind is the soup Nazi from Seinfeld. But probably a couple parts of the U.S. government. But for the most part, no, I think everybody has to think about what their customer, you have to think about what their customer wants, but I think what you said, the customer isn't all right. Right? So you have to factor that into mind, and just because they want it doesn't mean you really need to give it to them, because sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the ability to say no to certain customers is as important as saying yes to many customers. At least in the early stage of the innovation.
And there are a lot of people out there in life that think yes is the only answer, and if you say no, they try and turn around you to get to yes. So the ability to say no to somebody and have them feel good about it, that's a true challenge.
When would you decide to risk cannibalizing an analog business with a digital one?
So if you're an analog business, when do you see the risk of the existing digital businesses start cannibalizing?
Yeah, I mean, a basic example of that is when you're talking about how you still have to send letters to some of your customers. At what point do you decide to pull the Band-Aid off and versus any blowback?
You know, you get to a point where you start looking at the cost of mailing. You look at, the dispersion. You look at do you have the technology in place for the electronic side that you would feel comfortable putting out there, that it is a better option. You try a little bit of the carrot, and you come to a decision point. Ultimately, this is costing me X millions of dollars, so I'm going to use a little bit more of the stick. If you want to have this, you're going to have to pay for it. And then it's something you'll get a bunch of people that will avoid the $50 fee, and then move on to the electronic world. And you're going to end up with a rump state, and if the question is that 10%, 20%, what's that number? You do the math and you say, what happens if I lose every single one of those? And if you can support it, you can deal with it, you do it, because you're not going to lose all of them. You don't have a bunch of moaning and complaining about it, you do it. To me, it all comes down to the numbers. On the numbers, you have to have the proposed solution in place. It has to be good, it has to be tested, people have to be using it. You try the carrot, use a little of the stick, and then bend it off.
Eloy, is there always a formula to it?
No, I think this is one of the hardest things for a public company, which has investors who are looking for quarter-to-quarter results, to navigate. But I think if you make the choice in the short term, you will die. Like in G's context, this is fundamental, and it's not just us. I think Schneider Electric, Krish talked about the same thing. We have developed industrial economy based on a break-fix model. You sell a widget, and then if it breaks, you go sell parts and services to make, and that's where most of the margin was. And if you now do it the right way with the software technology, connectivity, and ecosystem, you will sell less hardware, and you will sell less parts, and you will do less services. But if you don't do it, someone else will do it. So if you control it quarter to quarter, I think the word cannibalization kind of misleads, in my view, the strategy. You are better off cannibalizing yourself than anyone else cannibalizing you. And then it's an art of how you handle investor confidence. If you have a J curve, you are losing money in the short run, and so did Amazon for 5 years. So how you model that for the investors to understand that, hey, look at my growth. The 20% business that's growing at 70% year over year, and each dollar is not the same. A dollar of software is not the same as a dollar of hardware and services. In tech industry, that's a 13 times multiple. In an industrial company, that's barely a 2 times multiple. So I think it's a little bit of internal mindset change that our CEOs need to measure things differently. You don't use the same, what I would call Horizon 2 mature business metrics to run your startup. But if you don't cannibalize yourself, someone else will cannibalize. You've got to develop your next type.
If you do that evolutionary change and you're good at it and you manage the numbers, it's not this huge, gigantic event in your company. It's just part of the natural ethos as you grow and you develop. But you have to believe in the numbers. You have to be very diligent about it. You can't do it this month and not the next month. You have to be there every year, day in and day out.
Tom, Eloy, thank you guys. Thank you for your time, everybody.